The Outlaw Josey Wales concludes after news at 10.
There are times in your life when you need a friend to watch with. And that could be sooner than you think. Tuesday late, sit back but don't relax for Central's Thriller Chiller.
And watch out for Roger Daltrey in tonight's Thriller Chiller, which is The Legacy, and you can see that at 12:10. Coming up next, the news.
Mr. Ward? Yes? Ian Hubbard.
When somebody comes to sell you a pension, life assurance, or a mortgage, will they sell you one that suits you, or one that suits them? At Allied Dunbar, we promise we won't offer you any of our products until we've completed and analysed a thorough fact find.
I want to draw a salary from it.
So the first time we meet, don't expect us to sell you anything at all.
You'll need a generous length in the arm.
Allied Dunbar. Before we open our mouths, we open our ears.
Free in Woman's Weekly, another superb paper pattern. So 3 stylish jackets and 3 beautiful blouses with our multi-size pattern. Free in Woman's Weekly.
Alfonso, my new goalkeeper, finds it rather chilly here after Italy. So I've got him a storage heating system from the team you can trust, East Midlands Electricity. Storage heating starts at around £200 and it runs on economy 7 electricity at less than half price. So, unlike Alfonso, it's very affordable. Gonna be hot stuff on Saturday, Alfie? East Midlands Electricity, the team you can trust.
He knows they're cool. He knows they're clear. But what he doesn't know is that now they're even mintier. Silly boy. Fox's Glacier mints. Now 10% more minty.
Now you know what an oil has to go through. Why chance anything less?
Du hast einige Leute ziemlich verblüfft in der Firma.
Oh ja? Warum?
Darum. Wenn ich die Wahl hätte...
Ich mag einfach die Art, wie er gebaut ist.
Ich verstehe, was du meinst. Schnell?
In England nennen sie es Fastback. Wann musst du bei der Staatsgalerie sein?
Wir kommen gut voran.
Faszinierendes Gebäude.
Ja, stimmt.
Britischer Architekt.
It's okay. It's just a nightmare.
The 24th Olympiad. TV Times provides a front seat for the opening ceremony and the first week's action with our daily events diary. And enter our Olympic competition for this exciting car. In a frank interview, Sally Burton tells of her controversial marriage, and you could be invited to a lunch with Princess Diana. Go for gold with TV Times.
For Miss Marple, even holiday snaps have a sinister side.
Like to see a picture of a murderer?
But it's no joke.
Well, I'll be damned.
Has he recognized the murderer? Which one is he? Or she? find out. Saturday suspense at 8 on Central. Agatha Christie's A Caribbean Mystery. We return to the Outlaw Josey Wales with Clint Eastwood in just over half an hour. That's after the national and the international news coming up now from ITN. It's 10 o'clock.
Soldier A says, I thought he was going for the button. The expelled Cubans say MI5 was working against them. The German freed in the Lebanon says, I'm born again. How Sport plans to stop the flying start. And the Princess helps AIDS families feel a little less afraid. Good evening. An SAS man known as Soldier A has described the final seconds when he decided he had to shoot dead 2 of the IRA terrorists in Gibraltar. Of Daniel McKern, who he thought was about to set off a huge car bomb, he said, I thought he was going for the button. I shot him in the back. Of Mairead Farrell, he said, she was going for her bag. I shot her once in the back. Soldier A said, given the same acts and the same aggressive actions as then, I would do it again.
In the back of a van, half an hour before dawn, an SAS soldier travelled to court to describe how he shot 2 of the terrorists and to say he would do it again. It's the first time in the 6 months since the killings that the Special Air Service team story has been publicly told. Soldier A, that was all the court heard about him, stood behind a curtain on view only to the coroner, counsel and jury. He was formally told by Mr. Felix Pizzarello, the coroner, that he need not answer any questions he felt might incriminate him. Said the coroner, if you feel you shouldn't answer, do not answer. On Sunday the 6th of March, he said, he was on duty in the town centre around Main Street. He'd been deployed with Soldier B. They were one SAS team. Armed with a 9mm Browning pistol with 12 bullets, he carried 3 spare magazines. He explained how, during the surveillance operation, he and his colleague used a coffee house and a shop to keep watch while remaining undetected. It was in Main Street that Soldier B, his partner, first saw the 3. He didn't point them out, said A, he just looked and turned his back. The IRA trio walked away in the direction of the border. A and B were dispatched after them. He explained how he came from the town centre, down a small laneway, and there saw Savage, McKern and Farrell standing by the traffic lights. The 3 were talking and smiling. He and Soldier B were standing a short distance away at the junction with the lane. At this point, the pair decided to move down towards the IRA gang. But then Savage separated and walked back towards the oncoming SAS soldiers. Said A, he bumped my shoulder as he moved past. He went on. B was about to turn to arrest him. I stopped him and said we'll go for McKern and Farrell. Another SAS team, C and D, were close by and had seen Savage separate from the other 2. He described the moment that he and McKern stared directly at each other. We made eye-to-eye contact, he said, and McKern stopped smiling. He went on, it's hard to describe, sir. It's almost as though he had a realization of who I was and that I was a threat to him. Speaking a little faster now, he told the court, at this stage I was just going to shout for them to stop. And at the same time, I was drawing my pistol. I went to shout. I actually don't know if it came out. He said McKern moved his elbow aggressively in front of his body. I had it in my mind, he said, that McKern was going for a button. And then he described the final moments. I was drawing my weapon. I fired at McKern 1 round in the back. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Farrell had a bag under her left armpit. She was grabbing for the bag and turning inwards. I thought she was going for the button, so I shot Farrell in the back, sir. I engaged McKern with a further 3 shots, 1 in the back and 2 to the head. McKern fell down and his hands were away from his body. Mr. Paddy McGrory, for the families of the dead, asked what were the thoughts of Soldier A when he was eventually alone that night. Uppermost in his mind, he said, was that they'd stopped the detonation of a bomb. Said Mr. McGrory, did you have a sense of satisfaction? Answer, relief would be the word. Mr. McGrory, any regrets? Soldier A, of what? Mr. McGrory, 3 people have died. Said Soldier A, the lives of these people were not taken lightly by anyone. Well, before the court adjourned, Soldier A said that With all the information available and McKern's aggressive action, I would do it all again, exactly. The court will hear more from Soldier A tomorrow when he faces more cross-examination. Colin Baker, News at 10, Gibraltar.
It's now known that British secret agents were involved in last night's incident in which a Cuban diplomat fired off a volley of shots in central London. The Third Secretary, Mr. Medina Perez, and the Ambassador, Dr. Fernandez Mel, flew home today, both expelled by the Foreign Office. Shadow Foreign Minister, Mr. George Fuchs, said the whole incident makes James Bond read like a railway timetable. He called for an explanation from the Prime Minister.
Bullet holes in the ground are the only evidence that remains of yesterday's incident. 24 hours after the shooting, bus passengers who were at the same spot yesterday are still confused about what happened.
And I heard something and that I got frightened and I ran back down there.
I only heard the gunshots, about 4 or 5 shots.
As you were going up the stairs?
Yes.
Suddenly there were 3 very loud shots, and then we saw some scuffling and a lot of police arrived.
The main reason reports conflict is that although the witnesses were just a few yards from where the shooting happened, the view is obscured by trees and bushes. But tonight, for the first time, intriguing details are emerging. Behind the trees, it appears the Cuban diplomat stood on steps below his 4th floor flat and fired at a group of secret agents. Police sources here say there were 4 of them, that they were British and conducting routine surveillance. 1 was injured, but the Cubans claim there was a 5th man, a Cuban traitor who approached in a threatening manner and prompted the shooting. They say this man is called Aspalaga. Florentino Aspalaga Lombard was a Cuban diplomat in Prague. He defected in June 1987. The Cubans say he's now working for the CIA. It's this man the Cubans claim approached their diplomat yesterday, and they say this man who Mr. Perez injured when he opened fire. Tonight, the expelled gunman's flat is empty. Whether another diplomat is allowed to occupy it will depend on whether Anglo-Cuban relations can be repaired. Michael Jeremy, News at 10, Central London.
Tonight, the Cuban ambassador departed for home with his 3rd secretary, Senor Medina Perez, the man who fired the shots yesterday. Chapman Pincher, a writer on espionage matters, thinks the Cuban version of events highly likely.
The first thing to realize is that this so-called diplomat, of course, was not just a diplomat, the 3rd secretary. He must have been an intelligence officer of some kind. And this would support the fact that they wanted him to defect, because he wasn't just a Cuban defecting, if he had defected. Would have been a quite important intelligence officer defecting, and of course he would have had a lot of information, which is what they want. So that makes sense. It also seems to be fairly definite now that there was at least 1 British security officer in the car.
Tonight, Labour Foreign Affairs spokesman George Fuchs demanded answers from the government about the affair.
It's unbelievable, it's sinister, it's cloak and dagger, it makes James Bond read like a dictionary, and we need to know exactly what is happening. These kind of incidents put British lives at risk on British streets. It was provoked, apparently, by British spies working with a Cuban exile, a Cuban defector. We need to know what was behind that, who authorized it, what was the background. All these questions need to be answered, and only the Prime Minister can answer them.
Last night, Foreign Office Minister Tim Egger was adamant Britain would not tolerate diplomats firing guns in the streets, and he justified the additional expulsion of the Cuban ambassador because he had supported his diplomat's action. Foreign Office rules on diplomats and guns were restated last March. Diplomats will not be given firearm certificates. Their protection was the job of the police, it stated. Guns must not be carried by diplomats nor be held in embassies. The Foreign Office is now waiting to see whether Cuba will retaliate by expelling British diplomats from Havana. If the Cubans do decide to make an issue of this case and diplomatic relations between the 2 countries are reduced to a lower level than at present, the Foreign Office will regret it but won't be deeply concerned. Diplomatic dealings with Cuba are not high on the list of Foreign Office priorities. Geoffrey Archer, ITN, at the Foreign Office.
Police in Northern Ireland uncovered another big arms cache, including Semtex explosive and mortars, in a house in Londonderry today as Britain and the Irish Republic met again to try to beat the terrorists. Police call the Londonderry find one of the deadliest ever found in the city. At a session of the Anglo-Irish Conference in Dublin, both sides agreed the IRA is preparing a bloody end to 1988.
Information about an IRA active service unit prompted a joint Army-RUC search which led to this terraced house. In a bedroom, one of the most deadly arsenals ever found in Londonderry, and clues to the wide range of attacks a new breed of IRA terrorism is capable of. An RPG warhead, nicknamed the tin opener by the IRA because it could rip apart the armour of security force vehicles. A mortar launcher, ammunition for the sort of heavy machine gun which brought down an army helicopter over 2 months ago, containers full of nitrobenzene, and a detonating cord for completing bombs. Beside it, armour-piercing bullets. The case beneath is packed full with identical ammunition. Fragmentation grenades, a pistol, and small amounts of Semtex explosives. Mortar rounds complete the lethal discovery. Security forces say a number of people have been arrested. The RUC says today's operation is being linked to inquiries which followed an explosion a short distance away in which 2 innocent people died a fortnight ago.
In a very, very densely populated area, we have found this large quantity of deadly weapons. We are appealing to the public. Any person who saw anything suspicious at all, has any shred of information which they can pass on to us, to give it to us, so as we can prevent death and destruction happening.
The security forces believe some of the armoury originated from Libya. They fear more arsenals could be hidden in the area. Andrew Simmons, News at 10, Northern Ireland.
In Dublin, Mr. King's first call was on Mr. Hockey. Their meeting lasted 50 minutes. That's longer than expected, but today's meeting was brought forward on Mr. Hockey's insistence. After yesterday's bombs in the north, security had clearly been stepped up in Dublin, and the Garda were out in force around today's conference. Mr. King would normally have been accompanied by Sir Kenneth Bloomfield, whose home was bombed yesterday, but the civil servant had stayed in Belfast. The British gave intelligence details today of the intensified campaign the IRA is expected to launch. The Irish ministers agreed to keep up the pressure, but they pointedly inserted a phrase in tonight's communique. Terrorism must be countered, it says, at all times within the law. But it's clear that today's conference did spend more time than usual discussing the need for political movement. Afterwards, the Northern Ireland Secretary emphasised he only wants political movement within Northern Ireland.
It's no secret that I'm keen to encourage dialogue in Northern Ireland, and it's no secret that the Irish government and the Taoiseach take a great interest in that matter as well.
But the two sides do differ. The British government and Mr. King want to get the SDLP talking to the Unionists with the ultimate objective of setting up a devolved power-sharing government in the north. That's the way forward envisaged by the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and the British say it should therefore be supported by Mr. Hockey. By contrast, the Irish minister said afterwards talks must not be confined to the north.
I hope it will be encouraged, north and south, that all parties and all people who have a contribution to make towards political talks, towards dialogue on the widest possible basis, so that we can reach the best possible agreed measures.
The Irish government and Mr. Hockey also want to get the SDLP and Unionists talking, but they don't want a devolved government in the north, believing that would reinforce the division of Ireland. Ultimately, Mr. Hockey wants some form of all-Ireland conference, which would include parties from the south. But as Mr. King left for Belfast, the leader of the official Unionists, whose cooperation will be needed if either government's plans are to proceed, is being typically cautious about their participation in any new talks.
I know what people are thinking, and they're saying to me, Jim, it's all very well to talk about political structures and political initiatives, but how many of us are going to be alive next year to enjoy them?
So while Dublin and London are closer than ever before in their cooperation against the terrorists, there is now a real disagreement over the best way forward politically. And if Mr. Hockey is determined to block any moves towards devolution in the north, that disagreement seems bound to widen. David Rose, News at 10, Dublin.
The West German hostage freed in Beirut arrived home in West Germany tonight after 20 months in captivity. Rudolf Cordes says he was treated well, but has no news of any of the other Western hostages.
Rudolf Cordes looked pale and drawn as he was handed over to the Germans by the Syrian foreign minister in what has become a routine hostage ceremony in Damascus. The West Germans' release, for which Syria is claiming some of the credit, follows speculation that his kidnappers exacted some form of ransom from the government in Bonn. The Germans have persistently denied paying out any form of blood money to the Beirut kidnappers. But Bonn's denials are given little credibility by Syrian and Lebanese security sources. They claim, without proof, that the Germans gave money and certain guarantees and assurances to secure the release. Those guarantees, it said, relate to the demands of this man, Abdul Hadi Hamadi, a leading Hezbollah extremist who is believed to lead the Holy Warriors for Freedom. His fanatical supporters kidnapped Cordes, hoping to extract leniency from the German court now trying Hamadi's brother Mohammed for the 1985 hijacking of a TWA passenger jet. Whatever the truth, the Germans aren't about to go into any details. Herr Cordes and his wife Marlene are simply thankful that the ordeal is over and that they can restart their lives together. Brent Sadler, News at 10, Damascus.
In South Africa, 3 anti-apartheid activists have escaped and taken refuge in the American consulate in Johannesburg. America won't hand them back. A report next. Plus, the post office workers are disagreeing about going back or not. And the airlift from Hurricane Gilbert, which has now killed 30 in Jamaica. That's in a couple of minutes.
This man makes his living by flying the Atlantic. Yet none of the crew even recognize him. When he's on board, he's treated just like any other passenger. Because that's his job, to be just another passenger. The difference with this passenger is that on every flight he takes, he makes a report. And every report goes to someone who believes in running an airline from the passenger's point of view. The chairman of TWA.
Hi. Problems getting away? No.
Hotpoint. Why make life complicated?
Lloyds Bank have asked us to talk about their new Headway package for young people. Lloyds Bank believe that you should be in charge of your money. So every new account holder over 16 gets a personal organizer, a money management pack, and a checkbook with interest on their money. When you're 18, you're given a Lloyds Bank card. It's a novel little number. It's a check guarantee card and a cash point card. You can also use it like a credit card, but it actually works like a check. The card is available to anyone, from students to, him, for instance, and that really is about it.
You've forgotten the black horse, dear boy.
Oh, yeah. Look, if we're going to work together, you've got to remember your lines. You've got to sit there and do nothing.
Lloyds Bank, the thoroughbred bank.
DuPont developed Antron Stainmaster carpet. Even if a stain like this soaks in for hours, it's a memory in minutes. Antron Stainmaster carpet. Even dried-in stains come out.
The American Embassy in South Africa says it won't force 3 leading black South African activists to leave the Johannesburg consulate where they've taken sanctuary. The men escaped from a hospital where they were being held under the country's emergency regulations.
The 3 activists bedded down tonight in the plush offices of the American consulate as negotiations continued about their future. The three are among the most prominent anti-apartheid leaders to have been detained. 32-year-old Murphy Morobe was publicity secretary of the United Democratic Front, which was virtually outlawed by the government 6 months ago. He and fellow leader Muhammad Vali had been held for 14 months without trial. The third detainee, Busi Kanyili, had spent 21 months in detention. Relatives of the men tried unsuccessfully to visit them this afternoon, but a US spokesman gave this assurance.
In accordance with our worldwide policy, the United States does not offer asylum in its consular and diplomatic premises. However, consistent with this policy, we permitted these men to enter the consular premises, and we will not press them to leave against their will.
And those in touch with the detainees received an assurance from the ambassador about their safety. But what of their demands?
Are they seeking political asylum?
There are no demands that they have made as yet, and we hope that through negotiations we would be able to actually ascertain that.
The escape bore a striking resemblance to the case of the Durban Six, who 4 years ago today began a 3-month sit-in at the British consulate there. The three activists have now been inside the consulate for 12 hours, their presence a source of considerable embarrassment to the American government. Relations between the United States and South Africa have already been strained by a tough sanctions bill now before the US Congress. But this incident threatens little less than a diplomatic crisis. Kevin Dunn, News at 10, Johannesburg.
A Royal Navy frigate HMS Active is heading for Jamaica and the Cayman Islands to give help after the devastation caused by 160-mile-an-hour winds of Hurricane Gilbert. More than 1,000 British people are said to be caught in the islands, and water, power and communications are badly hit. Gilbert came in from the Atlantic straight over Jamaica and on to the Cayman Islands. It's now curving up into the Gulf of Mexico. At least 5 people died in the Dominican Republic on Sunday. 30 have been reported dead in Jamaica. There are no reports of British casualties.
This was Hurricane Gilbert just 2 hours ago. Now rated a Category 5 hurricane, it's one of the most dangerous storms of the century. Worst hit so far, the island of Jamaica.
Many homes have been lost, and the need for food and other emergency supplies are needed.
The voice of a ham operator speaking from Jamaica this afternoon. With communications knocked out by the storm, ham radio operators in the United States have been monitoring such requests for help from their colleagues in the island.
4 deaths. 4 deaths reported, 1 body recovered.
Across the island, the death toll has now reached over 30, with hundreds homeless.
The worst is over from the information that I've heard here in the last 10-15 minutes. The problem now is trying to establish communication on the island.
These people did escape the storm among hundreds of tourists, British and American, evacuated from the Cayman Islands as Gilbert headed their way. It had been a chaotic departure.
That was a fiasco. I mean, it was like save your own butt first. It was really bad.
At some points there was some hostility among people waiting and shoving and things like that. Yeah, we were worried.
They were showing us what was happening in Jamaica and how they were saying the eye of the storm was passing right through, and it was 120-mile-an-hour winds, and the whole island was covered with water. We figured it was time to get out.
As word comes in from Jamaica of widespread damage, flooding, even looting, Hurricane Gilbert is now headed for northern Mexico and Texas. Ken Rees, News at 10, Washington.
Half of Britain's 15,000 post offices were back to normal today, but thousands of workers in many major centres are still out, including Glasgow, York and Hull.
The return to work in some areas was swift. By mid-morning, Brighton had joined other offices like Tunbridge, Sevenoaks and Ashford in Kent. The backlog of mail and parcels expected to take up to a fortnight to clear. As they restarted, some postmen appeared a little rusty after the 2-week shutdown. By tonight, the Post Office reported that postmen at 50 offices had called off their strike action. Those include 6 of the 82 big mechanised sorting offices. But in several areas, it was clear that selling the peace plan wasn't going to be easy. In Liverpool, where there'd been vigorous clashes over the use of casual labour, a decision whether to return was put off till tomorrow. Union leaders said there'd be a deal if the Post Office showed common sense. A row over overtime and casual workers dashed hopes of an early return in Glasgow. The union wants 7 times the normal overtime to beat the backlog. Management say twice normal is ample, more would amount to a reward for striking. Some activists in Leeds accused their national leaders of a sellout, but the vote there was to return.
At the end of the day, our members have demonstrated to me this morning at a mass meeting that they felt it was worthwhile, that it was something that they had to defend our position, and have done it.
The union nationally warned tonight that management attitudes in some centres was putting the peace deal in jeopardy.
The Olympic authorities are to tighten their rules about the start of the athletic sprints after the revelation that the world 100-metre champion Ben Johnson literally jumped the gun in winning his title last year. His great rival Carl Lewis has always maintained that Johnson got away with a false start. Now officials are saying it won't happen in Seoul.
Last year at the World Championships in Rome, Canadian Ben Johnson smashed the world record for the 100 metres and obliterated arch-rival Carl Lewis. The confrontation between the two in Seoul is being called the main event of these Olympics. But now the athletics authorities are finally admitting Johnson did jump the gun in Rome. Athletes like Lewis and Johnson react rapidly to the starter's gun. Only 42 milliseconds, that's thousandths of a second after the gun, Johnson's hands are already lifting off the ground. Then, well before Lewis, he's up and running, only 109 milliseconds after the gun. Lewis is relatively slow. He takes 196 milliseconds. That's the difference between gold and silver. Because the starter didn't call a false start, Johnson's record still stands. But the authorities admit he was too quick for the electronic equipment, which was set to detect false starts within 120 milliseconds of the gun going off. For Seoul, that'll be lowered to 100 milliseconds. In the laboratory, it's rare to measure reaction times faster than 150 milliseconds. So Johnson is either superhuman or anticipated the gun in Rome.
This is what the sprinter's trying to do. He's trying to not beat the gun, if you like, but to move exactly at the same time as the gun goes.
In the 1960 Rome Olympics, 100 metres gold medalist Armin Harry was widely thought to have jumped the gun. Third in that race was Peter Radford.
But to be in that situation and see someone in the lane next to you actually get away before the gun went, and you can do nothing at all about it, is a dreadful feeling.
Last month, Johnson was called for a false start in Zurich. With the new rules, it's unlikely he'll face the same aggravation in Seoul.
Tonight, soccer in the European Under-21 Championship. Norway won, Scotland won. In the Under-21 friendly, England 0, Denmark 0. The seniors play seriously tomorrow.
The main news again. At the Gibraltar inquest, an SAS soldier has described the moment when he shot 2 of the IRA terrorists. It's been confirmed that British secret agents were involved in last night's incident in which a Cuban diplomat fired off a gun in central London.
Finally, the Princess of Wales was thanked by a group of AIDS sufferers today for making them feel, as they said, less afraid. She spent 20 minutes reassuring sufferers, their partners and their relatives at the opening of Britain's first purpose-built day centre for AIDS patients in London.
The Princess of Wales has a genuine interest in the AIDS disease. She wants to counter public ignorance and help find a cure. So today she opened the Cobler Centre in West London. It's a clinic that deals exclusively with AIDS-related illnesses. She met patients like Philip, who was having a blood transfusion. She admired his waistcoat and put him at ease. "You can't get away," she said. "You seem very attached." "You're very brave," she added. "I'm very bad with needles." The Princess's visit was an important gesture. Her warmth in this group session was comforting. As one patient put it, her visit made us feel less afraid.
Well, it'll help the general public to not treat us so as lepers, because we're not. We're just ordinary people, just like everyone in the street.
And I understand that she also asked you about morale. How difficult is it to keep up morale?
Quite difficult. Quite difficult.
How do you do it?
I don't know. With the help of everyone here, they help you greatly. But everybody has their bad moments.
But no bad moments today. The Princess's visit was a morale booster. As one patient said, for too long, AIDS victims have been rejected and isolated. Simon Cole, News at 10, West London.
And that's it tonight. Good night.
Good evening. The father of the 18-year-old boy who shot 3 people and then turned the gun on himself is calling for an inquiry into how his son died. Mr. Ronald Haskett wants to know why a police van was driven at his son and came into contact with him.
He told me, and this is his exact words, they may deny it, but his exact words was, my son put the gun here, under his chin, fired, lifted himself in the air, and when he came down, he came into contact with the vehicle. The next day, Mr. Hopwood, who I saw with my brother-in-law, again changed the version slightly. He said, my son cocked the gun under his chin. First, he levelled it at the car, aimed it at the car, then levelled it and put it under his chin again, fired up in the air. At this moment in time, they said the vehicle was 5 feet away, moving forward, and when he came down, the vehicle struck him. And I'm just not satisfied because it's not logical.
Mr. Haskett is appealing for witnesses to the incident to come forward. Kevin Warrender, the father in hiding with his 3-year-old daughter Donna, has admitted kidnapping her, but he says he won't bring her back.
The call came through to a local radio station in Shropshire this morning, and detectives have been listening closely, hoping for a clue which will help them find Donna and her father. In the phone call, Kevin Warrender describes his daughter's reaction as he broke into the house.
Well, she was crying, obviously, because I woke up out of her sleep and just run with her. And that's the only reason she was crying. She wasn't saying, I don't want to go or nothing.
Donna's mother was in bed when her ex-husband kicked down the back door and broke in. She was then threatened with a broken bottle.
Donna, all the time she was coming down the stairs, screaming her head off, you know, really frightened. And there was nothing I could do. I tried chasing him, I couldn't.
It's little Jamie's birthday on Monday, and the one present he'd like best of all is to be able to play with his sister again.
3 15-year-old boys are being questioned about the death of 68-year-old Frederick Matty, who was attacked at his home at Lee Hall in Birmingham. He lived alone since his wife died of cancer. He had cancer too and was very frail.
My father was confused, but he turned around and said there was 3 white lads. Forced the door open, and they turned around and told him to get out of so-and-so bed. And because he couldn't get out of bed, they dragged him out of bed, and they kicked him.
The 17-year-old Brierley Hill girl found dead at a flat in Burnham Court has been named. She's Julie Louise Crawford. A 20-year-old man, also from Brierley Hill, will appear in court tomorrow, charged with her murder. Postal workers have begun clearing the backlog of mail. Deliveries will be made in some areas tomorrow. David Watson reports.
Shrewsbury and Telford were the first to go back this afternoon. They've been followed by Wolverhampton tonight. Workers in Gloucestershire are also back tonight, but there's still some doubt about Worcester and Hereford. However, the Post Office say work is resuming tonight in Derby and Burton-on-Trent. Mass meetings will be held tomorrow in Birmingham and Oxford. The Post Office is still talking about Coventry and much of Warwickshire. Northampton and Swindon have also still to be decided.
Finally, a removal lorry jammed since midnight in a lane outside Stroud could be there for some hours yet, as Graham Fitzgerald reports.
The driver and his mate were delivering furniture to Botterill outside Stroud when their 37-foot-long lorry got jammed between a house and a wall. They'd been misdirected down the wrong lane. They were stuck there all night, and today they managed to inch their 7-foot-wide vehicle away from the cottage and back down the lane. But first they have to get a mile down the lane in reverse before they can drive back to Basingstoke.
Now look at the weather for the central region. Dry and clear tonight, minimum temperature 6 Celsius. Tomorrow, sunny with some rain, top temperature 16 Celsius. Well, that's all from the central newsroom tonight. ITN will be with you through the night. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9:25.
Try Frish in your loo. It has more power to clean right under the rim. More strength to lift off stains and go on attacking germs. And it clings on longer to keep your loo fresher. Try Frish for more power and more freshness.
If you have a good business idea, why not get a proposition together and talk it over with the Royal Bank of Scotland? They may be able to help you turn it into a reality instead of just a pipe dream. The Royal Bank of Scotland.
It'll take longer than 10 seconds to get to know Mary Claire.
Strongbow. Nothing else quite hits the mark.
Here in Arizona, the West can still be wide.
Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington. Once you couldn't buy a thing here without gold, but these days you're safer with plastic. But after a T-burn, will your card cut the mustard? Nope. Surprisingly, in the States, Barclaycard is welcomed at thousands more places than certain charge cards I could mention. Personally, I'd be thrown with that one.
For details, dial 100 and ask for free phone Barclaycard.
For more information about the latest coal flow central heating boilers, dial 100 and ask for free phone Real Fires.
Try Frish Toilet Freshener to give you even more freshness every time you flush.
Mr. Jones is here to tell you exactly how much you'll have to pay for selected appliances at MEB. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Beautifully put. If you buy selected appliances at MEB now, you'll pay absolutely nothing until February the 1st. Will you, Mr. Jones?
I'm Casey Kasem. This week we have a very special countdown for you, the top 10 artists in the history of the Black Chart. That's this week. Don't miss it.